I think so many actors who made it, in a non-traditional way, really like risk their lives, like with this kind of incredible sense of purpose and determination that, of course, that's the case in many different endeavors, but the sort of passion and intensity, that you see in actors of this is what I have to do it's kind of really remarkable. And I also see it in my friends who aren't working and aren't, like people who have made it but they still like have this, maybe it's a Chekovian thing, like they are going to keep on. And I find that really kind of remarkable.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Mia Vallet is an actor. She sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character? Is there a typical first step?
I don't think there's one typical first step other than read the script. But I really feel like it's sort of like I kind of wait for the first sort of kernel of inspiration for that character, or like the first kind of thing that I identify with, or like, and it can be anything. It could be like a physical kind of language that's coming, or an emotional, like personal connection to the part, or like an accent. It could be something really like exterior, but like normally there's some kind of key in that I kind of like latch onto, and that might actually disappear like during the time of doing it. But I feel like normally there's some sort of little key that helps me open the door.
What if it's not there? Is there times when there's nothing there and you have to do this?
I feel like there's always going to be something there. There's going to be something there.
And what do you do when you find that? Do you cultivate that thing and see what grows from that?
Yeah, because it's something that you feel good about right away. And like starting with a new thing, everything feels really yucky
scary
and foreign and wrong and inauthentic. But if there's something that feels natural and like it's just happening, then that kind of frees up all the other stuff for you.
Yeah. You're almost in such potential fright that you need that little bit of floating thing to grab onto.
You need your little life vest
a little life
to protect me, like in these shark-infested waters.
Right. I mean, because at the beginning, like that's the important part at the beginning, right? Because you need that, and then once you start building, you don't need that life preserver anymore. That's what you're saying, because it could change. You could throw it away.
You probably do throw it away, but it's something that like keeps you going and says, okay, I have somewhere to be with this thing. I'm not completely floating in the air with no idea where I'm going. And I mean, sometimes the times when that doesn't happen, I think then it's just kind of a waiting game, waiting till it does, and just reading the script again and again, saying the lines out loud just to yourself, and something will start to happen, hopefully.
When is the time that you need to enter in either the writer or the director? Like how much time do you need by yourself there, just doing this process of finding that kernel or reading the script or everything? What is the moment that you need an outside force there?
It's hard to put an exact time period on it, because it could be that you've talked to the director about the script before you even read it, and that's okay too, because then you're kind of entering into something that the scaffolding's already been built for you, and you have a little bit of structure, and that can be nice. I'm not someone who necessarily feels impeded on by direction. I kind of appreciate that guidance and feeling like somebody's on the journey with me. So there's no one particular time, but I like having them to be there, as the questions come. It's nice to have someone to bounce something off of, and, we're kind of discussing this and throwing the ball back and forth, and that helps me throughout the entire process.
Talk to me about when you actually wanted to do this endeavor, and what did you do, and then lead that into your training?
Yeah, so I was, it's kind of a classic story, very shy kid. My first grade teacher had like a meeting with my parents being like, Mia has no friends. Like, who can we have her sit with in school? So she's like, has someone to talk to, and I picked like the most charismatic person in class who didn't want anything to do with me. So acting definitely helped me get out of my shell, and I always did it as a kid and growing up, but I really never felt like it was something that people did. I came from sort of a suburb where people did normal jobs and seemed to follow these kind of defined trajectories. So it was always in my head kind of an unrealistic expectation that I always told myself that's not possible. And I went to a summer camp, 11th grade. It was actually a state-funded summer camp. It was amazing, called Governor's School in Pennsylvania, and people there were actually like going to conservatories and treating it like that was a valid endeavor. And so that was the first time that I was like, wait, actually this is possible and doesn't make you kind of a stupid dreamer. But it took a long time for me to get that voice out of my head. Even when I was pursuing acting professionally in my 20s and going on auditions, I always had this kind of voice in the back of my head saying, this isn't possible. Like, your dreams aren't possible. I don't know. It's taken a long time to sort of quiet that feeling. Because it is kind of something that's really rare and lucky to be able to do.
Right.
And I never felt like I would be someone who would get to do that. But I was going to go to school for journalism, which I'm really glad I didn't, because I would have been a horrible journalist.
And there is no journalism anymore, right?
Yeah, that's even stupider thing to do. Exactly, like English professor.
I've been hearing that a lot, though. There are a lot of people who were about to go and be a journalist and became an actor.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, right?
It's curiosity and
exploration, investigation.
Maybe a sort of a short attention span of wanting to move from thing to thing. But yeah, I auditioned for a bunch of conservatories, and the last one I auditioned for was UNCSA, North Carolina School of the Arts. I flew down on their last day of auditions. Jonathan Majors was working the audition and was like sitting with me and my mom while I was waiting to audition, which was pretty wild in retrospect. And so then I went there for 4 years, and
what was that like?
It was intense. It was pretty intense, and I don't think I was prepared for what it would be. Because like going to my high school was kind of like something out of a teen movie. It was really kind of Americana situation, and then going to this school where on the first day they're like right away asking you to divulge all your trauma and your past. And I had never even been in therapy, so I was not kind of ready to, I didn't even know how to talk about these things at that time. And I didn't even know how to articulate what that would mean. And that suddenly you felt this kind of like expectation to not only do that, but then be able to channel it into your work. So it was pretty intense quickly, and my personality really changed because of it, kind of drastically. I think it really made me like reevaluate my life up to that point in a pretty intense and profound way.
Wait, can someone make the point that that's exactly what you needed?
It was.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it. It was what I needed. But it took time to integrate all those things because you're kind of just finding yourself as a person. It's your first time not living with or in my case, living with my family. And then I was finding myself, and then at the same time trying to find myself in these characters. And I think in some ways it took me away from acting because it made me suddenly so involved with who am I and myself that putting those things back together took some time.
Interesting. But then when you actually did put them back together, though, they're going back together over this foundation that you've laid.
Yes.
Right? And that's good.
Yes. It gave you the formal tools and the emotional tools to put things together. And the formality of that training, we did a lot of Shakespeare and voice work, and it really was like holistic, putting everything together. But it was kind of a long process of combining all these elements and self-discovery.
And this was 4 years there.
4 years there.
And then you come out of that after 4 years.
Yeah.
Were people starting to say, okay, you're very talented, at least toward the end of this?
People were saying that, and I never really believed them.
Sure.
and I was a confused person for a long time, but it was kind of crazy. So we did a showcase in New York, and my very first audition on that showcase, I booked this role in a play at the Rattlestick. And it was a big deal. Karen Allen was directing it.
Wow.
Joe Tippett was playing my husband. And it was kind of like this wild fantasy coming true all at once, right away, like everything. And I got to New York and had a great agent out of like the whole kind of dream that people go to drum school for. That happened to me right away. And I was so happy and so excited, but at the same time, I felt so wildly unprepared, even though after 4 years of studying, I feel like I wish I had felt more in control over what was happening. But it was a learning curve to kind of adjust to that whole new process of now I'm a person not in college with, this kind of support system and strange world that we've built here.
Right. Is that where you met Betsy? Didn't you meet Betsy in school?
I met Betsy in school. Betsy and I were the best of best friends in school. We were like, it's one of the most intense, romantic relationships I've ever had. We were really close. We lived together. We were basically like a single person in some ways. And then when we got to New York, we kind of had to find ourselves on our own for a little while.
That was necessary for because you're both doing the same thing, trying to do the same thing too.
And now we're both trying to figure out who we are outside of this context. And I was really hungry I felt kind of like a void in my intellectual life at school. And I did want some of the sort of other kinds of learning that I felt like some of my peers who had been to a more traditional college had. So it became really important to me to throw myself also into different intellectual pursuits.
Just on your own?
On my own. I started taking graduate classes in like literary theory and different stuff. And
was this just to feed your head or to supplement the acting in an intellectual way?
I think it was both. I had a really profound sense that I need to do this to develop my personality, even if it means that this is going to be taking me a tiny bit off the path with acting. It was something that I needed so profoundly, but I always felt like it's not separate from being an actor. And it's necessary.
Right. Did they give you different approaches to the work, or did they just put you on one particular path? And by this I mean like more of a Meisner approach.
They taught us a lot of different things, which was great. We did Meisner, Stanislavski. There was a lot of formal voice and speech training. And then when I got to New York, I wanted to continue studying, and I actually met this amazing woman. It's really devastating. She passed away recently, but she found me on the street after this play I had told you about, and she was this kind of really eccentric, big personality. She had studied with Stella Adler, Australian woman, and she came up to me and she was like, "Darling, like you're amazing, but you could be better."
Wow.
She had a million notes, and
she had her card out. Like,
she had her card out, and I did.
Wow.
And she was right about everything.
Yeah.
And she opened up things for me in a huge way because she was like, you can make more different choices. Like, what if you were dancing in this scene instead of just sitting there and listening? And she kind of taught me to look at scripts with more possibilities than I would have seen.
How long did you study with her?
it was very intermittent.
Uh-huh.
I studied with her for about 2 years. Then there was some time when I didn't study with her. Then I went back to study with her again. And unfortunately, we lost touch in the last couple years before she died. But yeah, she was hugely influential on me.
So what would you say, like, that schooling, those 4 years, put your feet in different waters and kind of was a good foundation, and then this woman actually advanced it to a place where you can actually tangibly use some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest gap I felt in my training at school was we really did so little work on camera. And then you're getting auditions and almost everything is on camera.
Yeah.
And I really felt unprepared for that. And I felt myself stiffen up in front of the camera, and I wasn't quite ready to... I feel like so much of acting in general, but on camera is a certain self-mastery of relaxation and focus and a different kind of awareness of how you're creating this scene in an environment that is not rehearsed in the same way and might feel more artificial. So I hadn't really developed those skills to the same level. So there was a learning curve for me there too, which she was helpful with. But also I think a big part of that comes with just experience.
Yeah.
And also, you know, failure and becoming better from your mistakes.
Right.
Oh, and I want to say the name of this acting teacher.
Yes.
It was Lynette Sheldon.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that.
I was going to say you should say that. Yeah.
A person who deserves some recognition. She was very special to a lot of people.
That's amazing. When did you become aware of this Brooklyn theater scene, and what was your first dip into that?
Yeah, so I feel like to answer that question, I have to kind of, take you back a little bit to where I was before that to give this story some context, because I hit a real kind of crisis in my personal and professional life. I basically kind of gave up on acting for a lot of different reasons, and I was having a tough time emotionally in my relationship, and I wasn't happy with my work. I didn't feel like it was good enough. And I still didn't, even when I was working somewhat, I didn't really feel like I deserved to be there. And my boyfriend at the time was having a really hard time in America. He was an immigrant, and we kind of gave up, and we were going to move to Georgia, to Tbilisi, where he was from. So I left New York City and I moved back with my parents, and I had gained some weight. And I actually booked this show, Hightown, and that was a great experience. But not long after that, my agent and my manager both dropped me.
Wow.
I guess because they felt I wasn't, sufficiently committed, maybe, and it was a hard time, and I feel a lot of guilt and regret about it. But at the same time, I was doing this little show downtown, which is a whole other story in itself. This kind of crazy underground show in the East Village. And so my boyfriend moved to Georgia, and I was like, I'm just going to stay and finish this show. And then I got a call from him, and he was like, he broke up with me and was like, I don't think you should come with me.
Wow.
We had been together for 5 years. We were engaged. It was pretty intense. So that was one of the worst times in my life. I felt like I had lost everything and everyone, and I called Betsy, and I was like, can I come stay with you?
Wow, yeah.
And like I said, we had been we were still good friends, but not at the same level of closeness for a while. But that's the thing about old friends who you've been through something like that with, that they can really just be there for you in a time like that. So I moved out of my parents' house, in my parents' basement, and moved back to New York. But I was still planning to go to graduate school for something else. I feel like there's no way for me back into this industry. And again, I just had some people who really believed in me, and I met my new boyfriend and sort of told him my story and that I really want to be an actor, but I've made these mistakes and I don't know if there's a way back for me. And he was like, no, you can't just throw something like that away. and he really encouraged me. And then COVID happened, like just when I was like, okay, I'm gonna get back on my feet.
Unbelievable.
And so COVID happens, and I was working. I started working on my own work during COVID, which was something I had never really done in the same way before. We started developing some scripts and ideas, and with different friends making things. And at the same time, I started school online. But instead, I said I'm going to do a degree online in economics, because I became like very interested in political economy during this time. And so I'm studying for the exam. This is like spring of 2021 or 2022. And I get a text from an old friend who had also studied with Lynette, and he was like, there's this guy I met the other night, his name's Matt Gazda. He's having auditions for a play. You should audition. And I was like, oh, I can't. I have to study for this exam. But I'll just do it. I'll just do the audition. And so I went to the audition. And it was very confusing for me, because I was like, who are these people? What is this? Like, are they acting? Is this just them? And I met Matt, and then that's when he was like, I don't think you're right for this, but I have this other play, Child Death Song. Let's do that play in the fall. I was like thrilled to do that with him. And then around the same time, I went to an event in Bushwick. And it was just a really interesting event. People had been cooped up for so long, and everybody was so desperate to socialize and talk to other people. And they're doing plays in someone's, little loft. Everyone's crammed in. They can barely move. Yeah. And I had an amazing time at that event, and messaged the host of the event, who is our friend Ryan Cheserwonko.
Yeah.
And he said, well, let's have coffee. And so we had coffee, and he was like, I am being mentored by James Cleary, and he says he knows you. And James had been the one who had cast me in that very first show that I did in New York, and also another show I did at the Signature Theater in 2018. And he was like, he says, you're great, let's work together. Wow. So we did, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I had this whole new acting life. Wow. And suddenly I was making friends and doing great parts, and I've been like so busy ever since, just doing these plays and stuff, and I really feel like it saved my life. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And did you get an idea at that audition of Matthew Gazda and how talented he is as a playwright at that moment? Or were you just like, okay, this is just another play?
When I read the script, I could tell he was serious. He wasn't actually at the audition. He was having someone else direct the play.
But how did he see you then? Was it on tape? How did he know that you were good for another role?
We met and we had coffee, and he talked to me, and he kind of gets a feeling for people. And the director had said she's very emotional. She's very emotionally connected, and so he was like, maybe. Right. And I told him, the Child Death Song, it takes place in like an academic setting, so he felt like it was the right fit. I think it was kind of like, he tries to pick people that seem like that they in some way make sense based on who they are.
So that was 2022.
Yeah.
And then I need to put my thing on record here. I go in December of 2022 to go see Sam Stillman teach a acting workshop. You guys come out and you do a play called
Who Am I This Time?
Who Am I This Time? And that's when that's like an epiphany moment for me, where I'm like, this is the kinds of theater that I want to have been seeing all this time. Whenever I go somewhere, my friend had a theater group, and I went, and as soon as like 2 minutes in, I'm like trying to figure out how to get out of there. You guys were doing this intimate thing, but it was funny. It was just well done. But I did not know I did not know you, and I swear this is real. I was just like, I got to find out who that woman was. I mean, she was really good.
Thank you.
I go and I look it up, and then I realize I see your name, and I realized that I had just filmed an audition with you months before that, where you made a gigantic impression on us. But the reason why I didn't know is you look totally different in that play. And this moment of realizing that that was you in this audition where you really impressed me, and then you impressed me again, but I thought it was two different people. And this was like a real profound moment. I was like, whoa, this person's amazing. And then I write to you all this whole story. And then you say, please come to this other play I'm doing called Winter's Journey.
Yeah.
I go to that, and again, it's this intimate play. It was in a bar. And again, it's my kind of theater again. And I thought it was the same group, but of course, these are two separate groups. This is the Gazda group was the Winter's Journey. The adult film group is the whose line is it anyway? What
Friendly Rivals.
Yeah, Friendly Rivals. But then there I am again, being like, whoa, this is amazing. Then you said, come see me in Child Death Song. I go there. Let's cut to the chase here, Mia, and I'm not exaggerating here. This led to a year of me going to see 15 different productions by these two groups in Brooklyn. A lot of the times I'm going because you're in the thing, and I don't think that there has been any actor where for a year has given me more inspiration and joy than you. And I mean that. I mean that. That was last year. And it's hard for me to, like, we're friends now, and like, I don't want you to think I'm exaggerating or just blowing smoke. Sometimes I'm like, does she know how much she inspires me?
I would say the feeling is really mutual. I mean, you are the most like supportive, but also like serious, insightful audience member. I mean, you wrote me some stuff after one of those plays about how it connected to your own life, and we had a really kind of profound conversation about that. And I wanted to say thank you for that, because it really it's all about the community with the kind of stuff we're doing, and the fact that we're forming these relationships in this way, and I really appreciate that. I'm so like thankful that I'm getting to do these parts, and getting to act in a way that even when I was working professionally, I mean, you're doing one day where you're getting interrogated on a cop show, and it's not quite the same thing as working on Chekhov.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that, but it's like also been about people. Maybe it sounds corny, but like really building a community with each other in a way I had really never experienced before. I've only found the city kind of alienating and distant and competitive, and this has been something very different for me.
I remember at some point, I think it was after I saw Child Death Song the first time we had a conversation, like you were saying, but I was saying, because it's such an emotionally retching play, I remember I said something to you like, this must not be very fun in the moment, like, or you know what I mean, because it's so heavy. And you said, no, I find this fun. And I thought that was so interesting, because it felt so hard to get there and to stay there in this particular play, and then to have to do it. It's not like 8 times a week. It's just the way nature. But it's still a number of times. You have to go back. But talk a little bit about what you meant by that. Like what is it about the part where you have to really bring out something that's maybe a little dark or a little bit or true sadness?
I find the preparation for it can be hard, because I like to give myself a lot of time before I do that show, especially the second time around. I've realized that that's something that I need. Is like is to take the time to live in it beforehand, and that can be hard because your body sometimes sort of rebels against it, and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. Let's go look at Twitter or something to shut this off. So pushing through, those few hours before the show, that can be kind of emotionally exhausting. But then once I'm on stage, I think there's something that feels maybe satisfying about releasing it.
Right, because you're bottling it up and it's circulating in you.
And now it's like, okay, now it's your problem.
That's what you did to me. That's what you did. And I really felt it that night. That's what you did. That was the exchange. You gave it to me. You gave the darkness to me, and I had to deal with it. Wow.
It's kind of like, I was really obsessed with psychoanalysis for a long time, and I think, people can kind of get stuck in it for so long because there is something so, maybe it's narcissistically gratifying, I don't know, but about just giving it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the job of the analyst, to receive it.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's, your scene partner or an audience member.
Yeah.
And I think when acting really became fun for me was when I stopped worrying so much about the audience. I've had times where I have felt really miserable on stage, and it's never about what the character's going through. It's when I'm like holding on to my narcissism about what Mia is going through, or like Trigorin says in The Seagull, like, I thought the people with blue eyes hated it and the people with brown eyes thought it was boring. Like when I felt like that, that's when it's really a misery, and then it means that you're kind of doing it wrong because you're making it about you and your own ego.
What did it take to get to that? Just that realization of letting that go.
I think profound experiences of failure that this is going to destroy me. Like the existential stakes had to be high enough that it was like, this will eat you alive if you don't. And also, I think developing a certain mastery over what you're doing, where you feel enough. Like, I'm doing this last round of Child Death Song, I'm kind of like, wow, I'm really not worrying what people are thinking. I mean, it's always something I feel I have to work with myself on, and that's part of the preparation, is kind of relaxing my nervous system enough to say, this is happening, we're going to be in this place, and we're going to be okay with that. But I think I've started to kind of control that voice, which is a huge triumph for me.
What is your pre-show ritual? Do you have like a relaxation ritual that happens every time?
It really does depend on the piece, but I do kind of like to think through the play in my head, sort of like warm up what the different moments will be, and sort of have that kind of stirring already in my nervous system, so I'm not kind of like shocked into, oh, now I'm suddenly in this place. Music is a huge part of that. Social isolation is a huge part of it, just because I just want to make sure that I'm not getting too distracted. And I try to tap into the sort of emotional channels that I've been building around that character, and think about the circumstances of the play and the sort of imaginary life of the character. And how that ties into my own mind. I feel like it all kind of gets mixed in these like subconscious knots of relations between different thoughts and feelings, and just sort of lighting up those neural pathways or something. That's, I think, specific to drama, I would say. It's a little different if I'm working on like something that's a comedy.
And lighter. Yeah.
There was a time, I think, where I caught you and I was saying, how's it going? You were preparing for, I don't know if it was officially called 27 Wagons Full of Cotton or whatever
we called it
doll. What was it called?
The whole evening was called Daddy Issues. Yeah.
But you did, like Carol Baker to me is on a pedestal. I think Baby Doll that performance is on a high high shelf for me.
It's pretty amazing.
That's not reachable. So I'm like, oh man, I'm seeing Mia, who I've been loving and all these things, but now she's doing that. How's she gonna win me over doing this? And you did in a big way. But I caught you a little bit before that. I don't know where. And you were having trouble connecting to it in the beginning, right? When in the rehearsal stage.
Yeah. That piece was a lot of fun to do. That was something where I actually did have that initial spark of inspiration in a very strong way for like the physical life and kind of accent and sort of persona of the character. But then I started to worry probably around the time that we talked that it was becoming like too much of a cartoon maybe, or that I was living too much in these kind of externalities. So then it was about trying to make sure it's rooted in some kind of truthful, like emotional life.
Yeah.
And especially kind of because we had done our own cut of the play.
Yeah.
So it had this sort of different logic. I needed to make sure that the emotional arc of the character still had the weight that I felt that it should have, while kind of it was sort of in negotiation with the production team, you know, keeping this sort of comedic tone that they wanted. While for me, I felt like, yes, this is a comedy, and there was a little bit of conflict around it. I think we reached a place where we both agreed ultimately, but I was like, but I still want to give the sort of pathos of what I see going on to also have its place, because otherwise I don't feel like this, you know, woman is getting the fullness of this kind of experience is being honored.
You have to make that, even when it's something kind of absurd, because this is almost an absurdity in ways.
It was, yeah.
You know,
and it still was pretty heightened. I think.
But you made that. That makes sense now. You made that connection, and that's what the necessary ingredient was.
And it was really like one moment, like realizing, okay, if in this moment there's a moment where I see my husband and I recognize what he's done, and then I decide to like maintain the either you could interpret it as live out the fantasy in spite of that, or embrace the sort of amour fati and like decide I'm gonna like live with this knowledge anyway. That kind of solved it for me.
Interesting. There's a certain point where you have to solve the puzzle of this.
I think so.
Of this, right?
I was saying earlier that I was taking like literary theory classes, and you were asking like, was that did that have anything to do with acting? And I do kind of think that, you know, actors are literary theorists in a way, you know, because they're doing some kind of interpretation of text with their bodies and voice and all of it. And so I do feel like I have a certain worldview about some things, and that I maybe like to impart into something that I'm doing. And I have a point of view, an opinion about different things. And especially in that case, I felt like I had a strong point of view about what's happening here, and that needed to be part of the story and part of the character's, you know, mental and emotional experience.
I'm having the great honor of seeing you in rehearsal for The Seagull. I'm gathering that rehearsal is a huge love of yours.
Yes,
like you
very
love
much
rehearsal.
so.
This has been a long rehearsal process. Is this like a dream for you? How long this is? We're talking about months and months. Is months of rehearsal actually giving you what you actually wish it always could be, meaning like living with it all this time?
It has been kind of intermittent because we've kind of rehearsed, and then there's long periods that we've been away from it. So I don't feel like it's been overly rehearsed. I think it definitely could have been, but with all this sort of, we've had, you know, different cast members and different things happening, I'm ultimately feeling still like down to the wire a little bit. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I'm curious to see what it ends up being with having carried that for so long. But at the same time, because the process has been kind of disjointed, I think it's been a nice balance. And like, I don't know. I mean, one of the things, you know, for me was dealing with film because there is so little rehearsal, and I had really, embraced the kind of theater ethic of solving the problem in rehearsal and finding a way deeper into the scene as you live it out again and again. And obviously a lot of people operate very differently in front of a camera. Many people feel constrained by that kind of repetition. I don't really. I feel like the more I say the lines, the more I sit with it, like the more it's just a part of me and I can just do it freely on the day. And I'm working on a short film for a while now that I co-created, and my friend, he wrote it, but we sort of worked together on developing some ideas about the script and character, and I had been sort of thinking about that world of what the story was for a long time. And I think having been with those ideas for a long time, actually, when we got onto set, it made me really free to like improvise scenes and come up with stuff, because I just felt like I've been sitting with this for so long that it's a part of me now. So I hope it'll be something similar with the Seagull. It's been an interesting process, because when you are rehearsing something for so long, we've had different cast members come in and out, and so it's been starting anew at the same time in a couple different ways.
Right. What is your feeling about Chekhov in general?
I love Chekhov, and I've gotten to know his work a lot better the past 2 years, because there's been a lot of interest in Chekhov, and I've been working on Chekhov and seeing a lot of Chekhov. I mean, he's a delight for an actor, because the characters are so rich, the circumstances are often so relatable, and in the Seagull it feels extremely contemporary in certain ways. You can immediately relate to the situations of the characters, but at the same time it's also a different time period, different culture that you have to bring yourself to.
What are you discovering through Nina about yourself?
Someone told me recently, I forget who said it, that they think Chekhov's main ethic, because he's not really a very polemical or didactic playwright, and it's hard to know what his politics are or where he stands, but they were saying that he does seem to impart this ethic of keeping on, and this is Beckett, but I can't go on, I must go on. And you get that in a lot of his plays. I'm playing Sonia also in this reading series with Matt Gazda, and she has that speech at the end about, we will work and continue to work, and she's hoping for her salvation in the afterlife, which is sort of a different question. But then with Nina, there's something kind of parallel, where she experiences this profound collapse in her personal and professional life. And then, depending on how you interpret that final scene, but she kind of decides to continue at it, maybe, hopefully, even in very different circumstances. And she's very humbled by it, and maybe almost destroyed by it. But she seems committed to keep on her path. And I was very inspired by that idea, and it had certain resonances with things I had been dealing with in my own personal life. It's not like I feel like I'm exactly a similar person to how she's written, but there are certain things about her situation that I can really empathize and identify with.
When you think of a castmate who worked exceptionally well with you, are there similar qualities with all of the ones that worked well with you, and what are they?
People who push me, who keep me on my toes, who surprise me, keep me spontaneous. That works very well for me, and who also bring a strong point of view to what they're doing, that really their energy really affects me and forces me to recognize that and respond to that. I really value that when I feel like I'm not alone here trying to make something happen. There's, you know, a strong energy being thrown at me that I have to recognize. And you can really feel that when somebody is, the way they look at you and are dealing with you, that they have a strong point of view about who you are, or who your character is. And you just want to feel like they're game, that they're happy to be there, that they're not resentful or feel like they're better than the situation or something, you know. That's really demoralizing.
Right.
So the spirit of fun and play, I mean, is such a huge part of it. Like, I feel like I'm at my funniest or my best when I don't feel so judged, or we're all kind of willing to be silly and give each other that permission. It makes such a difference.
And what are the qualities in a director that work best for you?
I really want to trust you, and I want to trust that you have the same level of perfectionism as me. I want to believe that when you say, like, we're moving on, it's because we got the shot and not because
time is running
run out. And I get it, of course, we want to make our day, but you know, sometimes you feel like, especially if it's a director you haven't worked with before, they don't really know what you're capable of or what you're aiming to do, and it might be okay or good enough, and maybe that's fine, but it's so good if they see something, you know, beyond maybe the easier choice or the take with a little more attention, and they're going to be like, let's do another one and really find it and take that time to find it. I mean, that's so valuable. And I don't mind directors who have strong opinions and want something specific, but I really want them to, like, want to give me a place to do that. And that was a really hard part of working in TV for me, because I had come from drama school where, you know, the ethic is it's an educational environment, and we are trying to bring out the best in our students, and then going right away to, you know, okay, we got it, thank you. And you're like, did I even say the line?
Right.
That was really you know, I wish I had understood that better at the beginning.
After doing all this theater where it's in rapid succession, I understand, like, the interest in film, but ideally, would you just be doing theater?
No, I love film.
You do.
I really love film. I love, especially, like, independent films. I really want to do more of them. I love the intensity of being on a set, and there's something, you know, it's a very different kind of mentality to me than a play, but I find it so exciting and enlivening, and I'm hoping to work in it more.
Wouldn't it be great if the way that this new kind of loft theater, or whatever you want to call it, is doing it, could be somehow applied to film? Meaning, do we really want to, like, have to fucking have a Kickstarter to get the 20 grand and have the lights all there and to hire the people, and then you get there after you wrote your script for 2 years, and then you get there and you have
2 minutes to get it done.
2 minutes to get this scene done that you've been thinking about for 2 years. We have something that adds up to, or that looks like everything else too. Like, you spent all that money and it just looks like all the other annoyingly vapid shit that we already have, right? And we don't, and the scene is okay, but the actors weren't coming alive yet, right? Whereas in this kind of theater, like, the potentially, I know time is still restricted there and everyone can't get together, but it feels like we've stripped it down. We don't have this we don't have this giant, we don't need this giant theater now. We don't need this giant idea of all these workers around and making this necessary to get all this money to make this play. We're doing it in a room now. We need that mentality in film, don't you think?
I completely agree with you. I mean, I think it is possible, and I see people trying to do that. I mean, our friend Matt Gill just made a period piece for under $20,000.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's possible, but it's, you know, film is also a visual medium in a different way, and it takes a certain level of ingenuity and creativity, maybe, to, and maybe it's about a kind of rethinking of the expectations of the medium. I don't know.
There you go. That's it right there.
Because everything kind of gets, even if it's subconsciously judged against the sort of visual perfection that we see on something like Netflix.
Exactly. I blame film festivals for only accepting stuff that looks like that shit.
Yeah.
And not stuff that somebody might be doing in their backyard in the middle of Tennessee to show their life right now. You know what I mean? That's done on their $50 phone or something like that. But they're really trying to express themselves. We're not going to, I always thought we're going to get to that because everyone has a camera in their pocket now.
I know,
But it's not.
I kind of thought that would happen too.
It's not, right? It's getting worse. Like, that kid has to now dream of convincing somebody with a bunch of equipment to film their thing.
And we're all guilty of it too. I mean, on this short we're doing pickup shots soon, and we're going to keep it cheap and bare bones. And then you find yourself saying, "Oh, but we need a makeup artist. I mean, we can't do it without a makeup artist."
Yeah. But it also would be better for the actors, right? With somebody like you who wants time to explore the scene a little bit.
A few different takes, to be able to try it a couple different ways, do the weird choice that might not work.
Right. That's the exciting thing of film. That's the actor-centric film that I'm trying to push for. What has been your assessment now, spending these 2 years doing all these plays? What is your assessment of having these experiences and thinking about what you want out of this work, ideally? I always say ideally. I'm trying to get at what is really going on in your head in terms of what is possible for you as an artist and what you would dream of it being.
I mean, my first intuitive answer is I want it to keep being possible for me to keep being able to do it. And, because right now I don't have the kind of career that's like supporting me financially in New York. It always seems like this could be it. When's it going to hit the point that this just isn't possible to keep on anymore? I'm very happy and fulfilled with the work that I'm doing, but I want to figure out how to make that a life that's like sustainable in the long term. So that's a really big question for me. I want to keep making my own work, and I hope that these companies will continue to grow and maybe find some support that makes them like more sustainable in the long term.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I want to keep also, meeting people and continuing to work with, new people. And I've just felt like I've continued to meet so many interesting people through this. I just really hope I can find a way to keep it up for the long haul.
Yes. I want you to know that there was a moment during the rehearsal for the Seagull where I thought, oh, this is going to be good. It was when we were in Brooklyn and you just started doing that crazy monologue, the play, which I always thought was hard to do and like kind of crazy. And that was my epiphany moment. I was like, and then I also was like, Mia's in this. Forgot.
I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like that, you're the person that I've been going to see, but you're going to be in this play. Then I became really mad that I can't see the play. I guess I'm trying to say, like, that was an interesting moment for me to be in something, but then to realize that I am a fan.
Yeah.
You know?
It's really exciting to like be in a play with someone where you want to watch them work and you get to watch them work. I mean, that's such an amazing thing. And I think something that's really interesting about this world is that in some ways it's so janky. I mean, you know, we're doing it in these spaces where like ridiculous things are constantly happening. I mean, I don't know, like, oh my God, there's so many stories. But like during Winter Journey at Beckett's one time, the cops showed up during the show. And I'm like telling the cops backstage, no, it's not a party, it's a play, you know? Or like at Matt's space, like during, by morning, at one point, there's this huge crash, like, you know, backstage. And I go back and I'm like, there's a play going on. And there's just some random girl from like the rave warehouse upstairs who starts like screaming at me, like, where's my wine?
Oh my
God. I was like, who are you? What? Like, I'm doing a play right now.
Oh my God.
So there's, on the one hand, it's completely like, you know, backyard. But there's also like everyone who's involved, not for the most part, is at least trying to bring a level of professionalism to it. And there's also people who are completely new to acting, and that's great too. But there's enough people that are in it with a level of professionalism and seriousness that I feel like they're able to kind of transcend that. But it's an interesting contrast because we treat it with the seriousness of like, no, this is a real show. And I think maybe that's kind of a cliche about theater people, no matter what. Even if it's a community theater, you know, it's the most serious thing in the world.
Yes.
But that is how we think about it.
When you think of the people that have inspired you as actors, what are the qualities that they have?
Daring, definitely. I think it's so brave to do this. Unless you're a person without the same capacity for embarrassment and shame, and then maybe you just kind of... But I think that's not the common situation. So I'm really impressed by their kind of bravery. And I don't know, actors, you know, when I was in acting school, I sometimes really felt a lot of resentment towards actors. And I you know, it was 20, you know, post-teenage actors can be really hard to be around. And I was like, I don't want to be around actors all the time. But now I feel like they're some of the most interesting kind of dynamic people who are just respond. The way they respond to things is never kind of what you would expect or how any other person would, you know, the kinds of things that they intuit about different situations is just so endlessly fascinating to me. So I'm constantly impressed by that quality. I don't know if it's like, you know, they just throw themselves off of a cliff again and again. And I think so many actors who made it, you know, in a non-traditional way, really like risk their lives, like with this kind of incredible sense of purpose and determination that, I mean, of course, that's the case in many different endeavors, but the sort of passion and intensity, you know, that you see in actors of this is what I have to do is, it's kind of really remarkable. And I also see it in my friends who aren't working and aren't, you know, like people who have made it, and but they still like have this, maybe it's a Chekovian thing, like they are going to keep on. And I find that really kind of remarkable. The things actors are willing to do to just keep at it, they will work in situations that can be very hard and emotionally draining. And there's a lot of shame and embarrassment of getting older and not having the same level of like success and career stability as your peer group, and it becomes more profound all the time when you meet people who are reaching kind of more traditional milestones, and you're just like, well, I'm not. You know, I'm unemployed right now, so that's my situation, and like I just, my card was just declined at Dwayne Reed, like buying water. So I'm doing really well. That really happened. But who else is willing to do that?
Right. Mia Vallet, I'm so glad you didn't give this up. And now you actually give me hope for the future. And I want you to come back on this show many times in your career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, the feeling is so mutual, and I'm so like honored that you brought me on, and it really means a lot. So thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.